Good morning, and thanks for being here. Today, we are dedicating special coverage, honoring and celebrating the life of Bellevue Police Officer Jordan Jackson. I'm Joyce Taylor.
I'm Greg Copeland. Any minute, a procession will begin in Bellevue and then wind its way through the streets there before arriving at the Meydenbauer Center for Officer Jackson's memorial, which starts right at 1 p.m. Here's a look at the route. Begins at 148th Avenue Southeast and Southeast 16th Street. That's near Bellevue College. It'll travel north, continue west on Northeast 8th Street, then north on 120th Avenue, and then west on Northeast 12th, then south on 112th until arriving right there at the Meydenbauer Center.
And if you're in the area, you're encouraged to go out and line the route in support of the officer and his family. It would be appreciated, I know, by all of the officers who are going to be part of this procession today. Officer Jackson died on November 21st in Bellevue from injuries that he suffered in a crash while he was on duty. Jackson was a motorcycle officer. He'd been with the department for 4 years. And joining us today to talk about what we're going to see is Captain Ryan Portman with the Puyallup Police Department. And Captain Portman's also a member of the Behind the Badge organization. He's going to help us through the procession, through the celebration of life today, giving context to some of the ceremonial aspects that we're going to see. So, Captain Portman, thank you so much for being here once again.
Thank you, Greg and Joyce, for having me.
I really appreciate it.
You guys have been busy. I mean, we're just talking about, obviously, the procession and the service today, but you have been working behind the scenes for a while now, helping the families, helping the agencies. Tell us exactly what you do.
So typically when we have a tragedy like this occur, we get a call very early on after the death, and we're asked to spool up our team, our line of duty death response team. And we're typically given a date and a time to show up. And our team is 30 to 40 people at any given time that will arrive, and we'll wrap our arms around that agency, Bellevue PD in this case, and we'll support them as they begin the process of grieving and mourning the loss of the officer. And we support them in the planning process for this celebration of life.
I think a lot of people may not realize to the extent that Behind the Badge is involved. I was talking to a couple of officers with the Bellevue Police Department. They've been there for years. And the words they use to describe what you all have been doing the last 2 weeks is extraordinary and unbelievable, amazing work, because they told me you have been putting in 16-hour days. A staff of 20 to 40 people have been there every single day since the day that this officer was killed. And the reason for that is because there is so much that goes into planning the procession and the service we're going to see at 1 o'clock. Tell us more about that.
So it is not just planning the procession and the memorial service, it's supporting the family all the way up until this point and then beyond, right? So when the movements are made, when Officer Jackson's moved from one place to another, we're there to support the family and the agency. So when the family has an issue or needs to get people from out of town into town, we're there to support that type of stuff, in addition to the planning process. In the planning process, we form an incident management team, and we work under the incident command system, and so it's structured with section chiefs, and each person has a responsibility that they need to do, to fulfill, to make the plan occur.
We're going to get back to you just in a moment. The procession is about to start, but before we head out to that, we do want to tell you a little bit more about Officer Jordan Jackson, who he was. He was 34 years old. He was raised in Bellevue, Washington. He leaves behind his wife, Kelsey, and 2 young children, a 2-year-old girl, a 4-year-old boy. His family wanted to make sure that we shared with you that he wanted to serve here in his community, in the place where he was raised, on the east side. And that's where he made so many lasting impressions with so many people. He'd been with the Bellevue Police Department for 4 years, spending the last 2 as a motorcycle officer. And just recently, he had been named Officer of the Quarter for his leadership, his excellent work, and more.
Let's take you outside now to Sky King over the scene, and these things are very much on time, planned out to the minute, and so we just got word that the cars are starting. I think there's about 100 vehicles. Is that what you said earlier, Ryan? About 100 vehicles there. Let's get down to King 5's Kayla Lafferty. She's at the scene there as they're beginning this procession. Kayla, what can you see?
Well, Greg, obviously the procession has not quite started yet, but we've seen a lot of these Bellevue police vehicles. They've been lined up here. They were out even as long as about an hour ago setting up cones to get this procession route ready. So as of right now, all of these vehicles we're able to see at the moment are Bellevue police vehicles. And You talked a moment ago about the impact that Officer Jordan Jackson made on not only his department but the community as well, and just seeing the officers in these police cars today, you can see that. We've seen some tears. We've seen, the community coming out, standing on the sidewalk to watch the procession, to honor Officer Jackson. But once again, we are not seeing the procession starting just yet, just a little bit behind schedule. Photojournalist Louis Sierra here with me is now turning the camera around to show you some of the people that have come to line up. We've been able to see people down the block as well, getting ready to be out here, support their community and support Officer Jackson, and how he paid the ultimate sacrifice here for Bellevue Police. And you mentioned him being from Bellevue. I think that makes it even a little bit tougher for the community as well. Someone that was born here, raised here, and made such an impact here as well ended up dying in the line of duty. So we're going to be out here monitoring this, making sure, watching everything, and we'll come back, of course, once this all starts. But I'll send it back to you in studio.
Kayla, thanks. And I know that we're looking forward to hearing from some of those people who are going to be coming to line the route in support of the officer and his family. It's always interesting to hear why people do come out and why they bring often their children on a day like today, which is so very sad, but a really important day to honor this officer and to remember what our officers do every day, isn't it?
Yes. It means the world when the officers drive by and see citizens out there waving, showing their support for what they do day in and day out.
It's interesting. You and I were talking a little bit earlier. This is a pretty short route. I mean, and logistics are all a little bit different times of year, but this is only about 4 miles, so it's going to move pretty quickly. What are you hoping to see along that route? I mean, it would obviously, you want to see those people step out for a moment and just pay the respects to the cars driving by. But that is, as Joyce mentioned, we see that, I hate to say we see it every time, but we do.
Yeah, I hope that we see the streets lined with adults and with kids, and it's nice to see people with signs out there saying, we support the police, we support what you do, and recognize the sacrifice that's been made by Officer Jackson.
His death has been extremely hard, of course, on his family, but also the Bellevue Police Department, the first officer killed in the line of duty in the department's history. Let's go to Natalie Swaby, who is at the end of the route at Meydenbauer Center, where the service is going to be starting at 1. Natalie, tell us what we are going to see later today, and also about the people who may have gathered there already.
Yeah, I do want to start with that because it's a very touching scene right out here where the celebration of life will start at 1 o'clock. I'm going to step out of the way so you can see. All of the police officers from the Bellevue Police Department who served alongside Officer Jordan Jackson are lined up here in front. And it is a very emotional scene out here. And I want to bring in Megan Black, who is spokesperson for the Bellevue Police Department. And let's start right there, Megan, because that is so emotional to see. Tell us the significance of that.
So all of our officers and their family members who are attending today are lining the final leg of the processional route as a protection, first line of defense for Officer Jackson and his family as they arrive. We want the Jackson family to feel the love, the unity. We want them to know how much he meant to our department as a colleague, as a friend, as just an amazing human and public servant. He was raised in Bellevue. He chose to serve this community, and we want the family to know how much that meant to us and how much we appreciate him for that service and the ultimate sacrifice that he had paid.
We talk about the family and thinking about his wife today and Kelsey, a 2-year-old girl, 4-year-old boy. Obviously, his family was so important to him, but public service was also so important to him. He was just with the department 4 years and he was a standout. Am I right? Can you tell me about that?
Without a doubt. He received Officer of the Quarter last quarter for his leadership, for his community service, for really a standout job in taking on tasks without being asked, with really giving to this community to serve and protect. And prior to being with this department, he was an EMT. He volunteered with the King County Canine Unit. He public service was what he was passionate about, and he found his lane here in Bellevue, the community in which he grew up.
For all of your colleagues here in the Bellevue Police Department, I know this day has to be so hard. This is your first in the line of duty death in the 69 years of the department. How is everyone handling this? I know it's unimaginably hard.
I can't lie. It has been an incredibly tough couple of weeks. The Bellevue Police Department, we have 186 commissioned officers. There are 48 of us professional staff. So we are a small department, and we're close, we're tight-knit. Officer Jackson was with the motorcycle unit here in the Bellevue Police Department, where he had 8 brothers and a sergeant that oversaw them, and so they're an incredibly tight-knit group. This has really rocked the department. As you mentioned, the first officer killed in the line of duty, and it's an experience that you just don't wish on anyone. We really feel his loss.
Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit more about Officer Jordan Jackson. And we're going to go now to Kayla, where the procession is getting underway.
Yeah, Natalie, thank you so much for sending it over here. The procession is now in session. I'll step out of the way to give you a look. First, we saw a large number of officers on motorcycles that led this procession. I think that really speaks to honoring Officer Jackson, as he was a motorcycle officer. Now we're seeing this fleet of the rest of those Bellevue police vehicles that we saw lined up for some time now, that are now getting on their way on this procession. We also saw some EMS vehicles as well, an ambulance, another black truck. And it's quiet out here. There's an officer from Bellevue or Puyallup. We're seeing officers from all around the region that are joining this procession to honor Officer Jackson. Some more motorcycle officers as well from many different departments. A lot of people also lining the streets here. They've kind of stepped back to give some space to the officers as they make their way down, and we're really watching how all of this is playing out. Some Renton police, Issaquah police as well. And, you know, I think seeing all of these different departments come out and honor Officer Jackson once again speaks to the officer that he was and how strong the police community really is. They're all coming out to support him. We know that he was from Bellevue. He did community service here in Bellevue, volunteering for the Boys and Girls Club. He's a father, he's a friend to many in this community. So watching this is a pretty powerful thing out here. The people watching this are quiet, just paying their respects to Officer Jackson. Seattle police here as well. I'm going to send it back to you.
Kayla, thank you so much. We were looking at all of the vehicles going by, talking about the vehicles involved. Bellevue, and then you said local agencies, Clyde Hill, Medina, and other surrounding agencies in Issaquah, Renton, and many, many more are part of this today.
Yes. So what we'll see on the procession is the coach, followed by a couple of family vehicles, the pallbearers, which is the Bellevue Police Department motor unit, and then the first Bellevue car is led by Major Sanabria with the Bellevue Police Department, and he's essentially leading the procession to the venue.
What we didn't see were the first motorcycles that went by. He was a motorcycle officer, and it is very difficult to become a motorcycle officer. It's one thing to be, first you have to be selected, and then you have to pass tests. And a lot of officers aren't able to get that far so that they can actually be commissioned as a motorcycle officer. And we heard Megan Black with the Bellevue Police Department talk about what a small unit this is. We're talking about 8 motorcycle officers within the Bellevue Police Department. So a super close, tight-knit. They're all like brothers and sisters.
Yes, it is extremely difficult. The failure rate for folks that want to be a motor officer is quite high. And those that do pass, they have a brother and sisterhood, much like you see with the SWAT team.
Talk a bit about what we're going to see here. This is a pretty straightforward, you talked about those escort motorcycles who went out, and I think you heard Megan say that they went out and they basically secure the path. Close the streets off, make sure they have a clear path for the rest of the procession. But you also saw, I think I counted 17 motorcycles, in the pack. in a pretty strong showing of force. And I'm guessing that those are from different departments as well, kind of showing their support for him because he was a motorcycle officer.
Yes, absolutely. Those folks, especially motor officers, they're going to come out in high numbers to recognize Officer Jackson.
What are we looking at here?
So this is near the Meydenbauer Center. You've got folks that are lining the route, and as the procession arrives, those folks are going to be there to greet the family.
And at what point will the family's vehicle join the procession?
The family's vehicle is actually
Right in the front.
Right in the front.
Already
right
there.
now. Yeah.
Headed that way.
There's a motorcycle that's way out front that's called a 5-minute bike, and they're running the route to make sure that there's no hazards in the roadway. And then you'll see the next series of bikes will be leapfrogging up and blocking intersections so that the procession can proceed with uninhibited.
And we want you at home to know that we're not going to be showing the family, just out of respect for their privacy on what is an incredibly, unimaginably difficult day. Very small children involved, a young wife, and other family members. So we are not going to be showing them out of respect for that arriving or even inside this celebration of life. And that's their wish.
Yeah.
This is a pretty, I mentioned earlier, pretty short trek as they wind their way through Bellevue. As they're coming down 112th, and I know we're a bit from that, but you see the camera pan here, that's 112th. You can see the Garrison flag. Talk about what we'll see as the procession approaches that from the north.
So as the procession arrives, you'll see the coach and the family pass under the Garrison flag, and that's where all of our the ceremonial traditions that you associate with a law enforcement funeral will begin. So the riderless horse, the bagpipes, the drums, and so on and so forth.
A day like this really is steeped in ceremony and tradition. Tell us about the Garrison flag, what it represents, and why we see this.
So the Garrison flag first came about in the War of 1812, and subsequent to that war in the Battle of Baltimore, the Garrison flag became the Army's flag that they fly during special events or gala events. And so that's why you see it flown at police and firefighter funerals.
It takes my breath away every time I see it. And the family, I'm getting closer and closer to Meydenbauer Center. How many people are we expecting to be part of this celebration of life today?
I would expect to see a couple of thousand people at the Meydenbauer Center.
And the reason is because this was not just an extraordinary officer, but he was just beloved in Bellevue and beyond. Some of the words that the community has used to describe him: he was a calm presence, passionate about serving his community, humble and quiet and fiercely committed, not just to his work, but especially a family man, really committed to his family and his children.
You know, this is, you and I were talking a bit earlier, this is the 4th officer memorial this year, all different circumstances, but you know, in this case, you know, he was hit by a driver. It doesn't seem like anything malicious, but it doesn't hurt any less in the community. You could hear it in Megan's voice. And I can hear it in your voice. I mean, it doesn't make it any easier when you have to sit down and do one of these. No matter, a line of duty death is a line of duty death, and you feel it all the same. But it's still hard to do. I can't believe that this is the 4th one this year.
Yeah, we started the year with Don Sahota in Vancouver PD, with Vancouver PD. Then it was Dom Collada with the Pierce County Sheriff's Department,
Yeah.
Dan Rocha with Everett PD, and now here we are with Officer Jackson with Bellevue PD.
Megan told me yesterday that he was truly one of the nicest guys you could ever meet. I mean, everyone in the department just really loved and respected him so much. When Behind the Badge gets that call that you hate to get every time, but that's why the Behind the Badge exists, what other aspects are you involved with that you will make sure that the family's taken care of on a day like today? From, the moment that they are picked up until the moment that they return home, there's just so much involved.
Every detail is scripted out, and we make sure that everything is covered in terms of the family's needs for this day, for this week, and into the near future. A lot of planning. There's a team of 4, 5, 6 people just with the family, including a liaison officer from Bellevue PD who knows Officer Jackson, knows the family, and they work as a team to make sure that the family's supported.
Trying to figure out where they are in the procession right now. They've got to be getting fairly close, and we should see them approaching that shortly. Because of the way this route winds, it's kind of hard to tell, but as I said, they're moving pretty quickly. During the, I know we can talk about this later, but during the actual ceremony, I know we're going to hear from his motorcycle partner. That has got to be tough. I know we had, I think it was Rich Scaniff who got up and talked about Dom Collada. This big guy gets up there, and anytime you have to do that, it's got to be so hard on other members of the department who were much closer to him.
Yeah, that's a very emotional time when the officer who was there stands up and talks about his partner.
How do you prepare for that?
I hope I have the fortitude, if that ever happens to me, to be able to do that.
I don't know if you ever can be prepared for that, right?
No, maybe not.
I just want to tell you all a little bit more about Officer Jordan Taylor, his middle name Jackson, who was just 34 years old. He was born in Spokane. He has such an interesting background. He was born in Spokane in 1988. 5 days after he was born, he was adopted, and his parents brought him back to Bellevue. So he was raised from the very, very beginning in Bellevue on the east side. He went to Issaquah High School, where he graduated in 2006, and he was super involved in sports, the co-captain of the varsity soccer team. He played soccer for 4 years. He was on the swim team, where he got a varsity letter in swimming. He played football in his freshman year. He sang in the vocal jazz choir, the men's vocal group, before he went to Arizona State University and then transferred to Central Washington University, where he met Kelsey. Just a really interesting background, and one of being involved in his community and then one of service. Let's get back to Natalie Swaby, who is at Meydenbauer, where the celebration of life is going to be taking place later today. Natalie.
Joyce, right now, as you take our shot live here, you can hear the bagpipes, and we know this is where the procession is going to be in just a few moments actually. Just as we watch this, it's also really clear how many connections Officer Jordan Jackson has to the community here in Bellevue, just being raised here and being involved in public service. So there's his family that will be arriving here momentarily. There's his law enforcement family that's lined up around the corner waiting for the arrival. And then there's just so many people that he's been able to meet in the community, lives he's touched, who are showing up here too, just to pay their respects today. We can see that this is getting closer to us now, and the honor guard is out here. And at this moment, we're going to keep this shot pretty wide because we are, out of respect, not going to be showing his family. But you can see this is the scene here now as this procession is close to coming to an end. Joyce?
Thank you. I think we just want to listen in. This is part of the ceremony that takes place that is so important, and we just want all of you at home to experience it. So let's just listen for a bit.
the boots face backwards. And this is to symbolize an officer or a warrior who isn't coming back from battle, and they're looking back on their troops for the last time. Following the riderless horse, which you'll see is two other horses, and this is symbolizing they're pulling the coach or a caisson, which was a two-wheeled cart that would bring munitions out to the field and then bring the deceased or injured back in from battle.
This dates back years,
Yes,
doesn't it?
yes. The riderless horse goes back to the Genghis Khan era. The boots kind of came around a couple hundred years later. George Washington was actually the first president, obviously, but he's also the first president to have the riderless horse, and then Abraham Lincoln had the boots backwards. So that's where the boots backwards came for us.
I want to remind our viewers that we are kind of keeping a wide shot out of respect for the family and the coach. And as we mentioned earlier with young kids, we just kind of want to give them a little privacy while also trying to bring this procession to you.
And most of the officers we're looking at are from the Bellevue Police Department. About 186 officers are in the department, plus 48 staff. Very, very small, very close department. A very difficult day for members of that department.
Yes. What you're seeing now is honor guard members who are touching the vehicle. Those are the family vehicles, and those honor guard members are assigned to the family throughout the day. The family will not be left alone. There'll always be an honor guard person there to make sure that they're protected and watched over for the duration of the ceremony.
And Officer Jackson has not been left alone from the moment that he passed, has he?
No, that's true. A casket watch occurs when an officer falls. So for 24/7, there'll be an officer or two with the fallen officer. As Officer Jackson is removed from the coach and brought into the Meydenbauer Center, a casket watch will commence again, and that watch will stay until the beginning of the ceremony, at which point those in attendance are watching over Officer Jackson.
I would imagine that brings so much comfort to the family that somebody's with him every second.
I would too. I really do believe it helps.
What transpires in that, the hour between the time the casket enters the Meydenbauer Center and when that procession begins? Is that just kind of logistically getting everything, because everything's already mostly set up in there, but getting people inside? Is that basically what they're doing?
Yeah, it's preparing for the ceremony or the celebration of life. So when we go in, the family's taken to a room off on their own so that they can kind of collect their thoughts and prepare for the celebration of life. And then the honor guard and everyone else are getting ready.
It's so good to see people along the route, like these people who've come to pay their respects to this officer, just so the family and the other officers can see that people care and they've taken the time out of their day to come and honor this officer.
Yes, it shows that their sacrifice, the officer's sacrifice, is appreciated.
What is happening right now? I know that they are moving the officer from the vehicle into Meydenbauer Center, but are there ceremonial aspects of this transfer?
So there's a ceremonial commander who is working with the pallbearers, and the pallbearers are the Bellevue Police Department motor unit, to remove Officer Jackson from the coach and then bring him into the Meydenbauer Center. And as that occurs, the honor guard will form an cordon of honor along the route, and Officer Jackson will be taken in through that cordon of honor.
Now, his children are so young, they're just 2 and 4 years old. Does Behind the Badge do anything specifically for the children during this time?
So Behind the Badge really began because we recognized a need to support survivors. And so, yes, we will be working with the family and supporting the children as best we can. Moving forward, what you'll see, or what they can expect from us, is different survivor events where kids who've lost a mother and father in the line of duty come together and are able to kind of just...
They're not alone.
Who knows
sadly.
better than somebody who's been through
Right.
it?
They're not alone.
I never had thought about that.
Again, we are, out of respect for the family's wishes, not showing the family, Kelsey or their 2 young children, mom, cousins, etc. During the service, we will be hearing from one of Officer Jackson's cousins, one of his uncles, and his partner, Officer Beretta, who was riding with him that day. Also, one of his best childhood friends. We're going to be hearing from him during the service as well. And I believe Governor Jay Inslee is here today.
He is present, as are, I believe, Senator Cantwell and Murray.
Yeah, we heard from, I had a story on one of his childhood friends yesterday, and he really helped paint a picture of what Jordan was like and growing up with him and the different struggles they had as they grew together and how they helped each other. And first it was one thing, then it was kids, and then, you know, it just, you keep hearing more and more wonderful stories, and maybe that's why a loss like this hurts so much, because that's one of the guys you want in uniform. That's one of the guys that you just want to cheer for. Like, hey, this is who we need out there in the streets, and to lose somebody like that, maybe it shouldn't hurt anymore. It just seems like it does a little bit.
You're absolutely right, Greg. If I'm a chief, this is the type of officer I want. Somebody coming back to their community to support their community and to protect their community, who knows their community. That's what we as a profession need more of, right? Folks that are willing to come back and serve in their community.
And if I could add to that, the fact that he was African American and such a role model for other young people of color was also just another extraordinary piece of his story.
Yes, absolutely.
Even to hear the chief talk about him, he's just was like, this is really a real big loss.
These 3 vehicles, are those family vehicles?
Yes, those are family vehicles. 2 are family and one's the pallbearer vehicle.
And we're told the casket has now been moved inside. Officer Jackson's now been moved inside. So the family has not, they have not left the vehicles, but they are going to be going inside, or are they inside already?
I would assume if they haven't left the vehicles, they generally follow the officer in and then go to the family room. So we may have missed it, but they may already be in. If not, they'll be leaving shortly.
And what transpires here between, I know we'll have a break here for about an hour coming up at noon until that procession begins. I'm sorry, until the service begins at 1 o'clock. But between now and then, what do we see? What happens? I mean, you have a lot of people still to get inside.
So that's what this hour is for, right? To bring in Bellevue PD, to bring in the other agencies, get them seated. About 15 minutes before the celebration of life starts, the MC will come out with an announcement about what to expect in a law enforcement funeral. The MC here is Andrew Papa. I don't have the name. The name escapes me now. But anyways, he's a deputy chief with Bellevue PD, and he's filling the MC role.
Just to tell you a little bit more about Officer Jackson, known by his friends and co-workers as kind and generous and brave and hardworking and adventurous and committed to his job, the father of 2 young children, a completely devoted family man. Every single person I talked to within the department said, first and foremost, he was such a family man, just so devoted to his family. Just such an interesting background. That he was adopted, raised here in Bellevue, went to Central Washington University, was an EMT, worked for the fire department, volunteered for the canine unit. Did you know that he also was a speed skater and was training for the Olympics at one point in his life before an injury?
When you said that yesterday, I was, what?
Yes. Trained in Salt Lake City, an avid fisherman and a hiker and a backpacker and a surfer and a snowboarder, and just, I mean, you see this big circle of friends that he must have had. He just got after it in every sense of the word. He just lived life fully. We heard from the Boys and Girls Club yesterday about the impact that he had, because even though he had his own kids, he always volunteered doing something. Played baseball with the kids, was always there to make sure that kids who maybe were needy had something to open for Christmas.
For Christmas. It was like he was that guy who was always giving.
And he was only 34 years old. To have such a legacy already. I mean, and that smile, I mean, you can see that he just exuded that kind of presence that you wanted to be around and wanted your kids to be around.
A remarkable individual. And when I was reading through all this stuff and speaking with Bellevue PD, I guess what came to my mind was a life of service and adventure.
Yeah, life and a family man.
And a family man.
I just have to keep saying that because he just was so devoted to Kelsey and his 2 kids.
Yes.
I'm going to ask my producer whether we can maybe air the story that we brought yesterday about his childhood friend, because it looked really good. Kristen Goodwillie spoke to that childhood friend, also a family who had just one 30-minute encounter with Officer Jackson, and they were just heartbroken over his death and say that he was somebody who made a very lasting impact. Here's that story.
It's hard to recall every moment when you've been friends with someone since childhood.
This is the day after his son was born.
But the major ones are etched in Dan Deginger's memory.
At the time, it was like, how do we get better at soccer? How do we get better at snowboarding? Or I skied, he snowboarded, and now it's how can we be better parents?
Through the years, they were always there for each other.
The best friends you could ask for, someone who would drop what he was doing to help you out.
34-year-old Bellevue Officer Jackson died 2 weeks ago.
Can't believe it, honestly. And
He was hit by a car while riding on his police motorcycle.
it didn't seem real at the time, in many ways still doesn't now.
Well, it's hard to believe he's actually gone. He was just such a young, vibrant human being, and he makes a difference.
Bill and Louise Henkes had a short but lasting interaction with Officer Jackson in a time of need.
My adrenaline was up because the car seized on the freeway.
Officer Jackson arrived to help.
He was just so warm and friendly, and he just made us feel at ease. It felt to me, and I think it felt like this to my wife and daughter, is that he was really going a bit above and beyond what was called of his duty.
Showing that whether you knew him for 30 minutes,
Small interaction like that, acts of kindness, they make a lasting impression.
or since childhood,
All he ever wanted to do was help people, and he did it in the same community that he grew up in.
Officer Jackson had a lasting impact on everyone he met. I'm Kristen Goodwillie, King 5 News.
Just befriended everyone he met and left such a lasting impact.
It just makes you want to smile, and also just so heartfelt, that kind of loss.
And if at home you're wondering, well, what can you do to help this family? There has been a fund that's been established, the Bellevue Police Foundation. If you'd like to donate in support of this officer's family, you can text the word Jackson to 206-448-4545. Again, that's the Officer Jackson Memorial Fund to the Bellevue Police Foundation.
Yeah, and you mentioned that fund. King 5's Brady Wakayama has more details on that.
It's clear that Jordan Jackson was really loved. It's very clear.
An emotional Valette Nolan, the president of the Bellevue Police Foundation, still reeling from the loss of 34-year-old Bellevue police officer Jordan Jackson.
The footage was heartbreaking. To learn what happened was really very shocking. Personally, I found myself kind of up all night thinking about the family.
Officer Jackson died after he was struck by a car while riding on his patrol motorcycle, according to BPD spokesperson Megan Black. Officer Jackson is the first officer in the department's 69-year history to die in the line of duty.
So it's the first time the foundation has had to step up for something like this.
The foundation has stepped up in a big way, creating a memorial fund for Officer Jackson Tuesday afternoon, with all proceeds going to his family. You can find a link to the fund on the Bellevue Police Foundation Facebook page.
I can say that we've taken in almost 300 donations, and to all those people, I really want to say thank you.
Nolan hopes the family knows the community is here for them, now and moving forward.
We're so sorry that you're having to deal with this. It's never easy, and to have it happen at this time of year has got to be even more difficult for you, and everybody here in Bellevue loves you.
Reporting for King 5 News, I'm Brady Wakayama.
So this is a little bit more about his celebration of life ceremony. The Master of Ceremonies is the Assistant Chief Andrew Popachuk. The eulogy will be done by Sergeant Robin Pesey of Bellevue PD. And then some of the speakers, Eric and Scott Taylor, cousin and uncle, among others, who we'll be hearing from, including his partner who was on the scene the morning of that terrible accident.
Officer Beretta. Officer Jackson had been a motorcycle officer for 2 years. The motorcycle unit extremely tight close-knit unit, just a few officers in Bellevue, a team of just 8, as we had mentioned, and a sergeant. They will be the pallbearers at today's ceremony. Their names are listed right here, including Officer Kevin Beretta, his partner and very, very close friend, who he was riding with on the day that he was killed. Officer Beretta also expected to speak, as you mentioned, at today's service. So right now, what's happening in Meydenbauer Center is they're getting ready for that service. It's going to be 2 hours long. And tell us what we're going to see during this 2-hour service, this celebration of life.
So we're going to see the honor guard come in. We're going to see the presentation of a banner that'll be attached to the Bellevue PD flag, the first banner for that. And then we'll transition into the ceremony where we'll have the speakers. And then as we finish up the speakers, then we'll go into the closing ceremonies, which are, in this case, it'll be a 21-bell salute, the presentation of the flag.
Okay. And you'll be back with us for that special coverage starting at 1 o'clock. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, we'll carry that at 1 o'clock on Kong. King 5 News at noon is coming up for you next.